All right, welcome back to the Power Hour. I'm Caitlin Thompson. I am thrilled to be joined once again by Miles David, aka Senor Tuned Into Tennis. Miles, I got you. We got it. We got the power situation figured out. Miles' Wi-Fi wasn't working the other day. I had to shelve him. I had to be like, listen, this Wimbledon team might be piping hot now, but we're just gonna have to wait. And guess what? It's still hot.
Okay, it's still hot. We're good.
Don't you think it's still hot? I mean, I think we have so much to
I think
discuss.
so.
We
Yeah,
haven't
I
caught
think
up.
so.
So give me your headlines. Give me your big picture. Obviously, we can get into Alcaraz and Jabeur, but your big takeaways, things that you think in the aftermath of Wimbledon are still sort of percolating. And then I want to get into all the stuff that's going down just today alone. It's crazy.
It's been a day, right? Wimbledon, I feel like it's really been my favorite one of the decade, which may sound a little heavy because we're only 3 years into the decade, but it really felt like a culmination of what has been brewing, especially on the ATP side, with Carlos Alcaraz lifting the trophy, especially over Djokovic in a 5-set epic. It's probably going to stick with me for some time because I'm an Alcaraz fan, and just the way he brings you into the whole journey of his tennis is enthralling, maybe more so than what Djokovic would have had if he had won. So I'm still stuck on that high.
I think no. For me, this was one of the best Wimbledons I've ever, and didn't even go this year, which is sort of a personal
I
bummer
know.
because it's nice to be there in person. But like truly, with the storylines, they really, really delivered. For me, obviously, the Alcaraz thing, seeing his learning curve from having played Djokovic just like 6 weeks ago and figuring out a new surface and a new tactical plan, that to me
Hmm.
was indicative of a very, very high ceiling. It's hard not to overhype this guy, but it was indicative of a high ceiling that I don't even think we knew existed, right?
He's a smart cookie. I didn't think that he was going to turn around that semifinal of the French and turn it into a final performance at Wimbledon and beat the 4 or 5 time defending champion the way he did, especially after almost eating a bagel in the first round. So, yeah, it's like I said, it's going to stick with me. And go Alcaraz.
Go Alcaraz. All right, over to the women. I actually don't know. I've seen you tweet all this week, but I actually don't know what your takeaways from the Vondrousova Ons Jabeur match. What for you was indicative of what we can maybe expect? Other than just being like, oh man, Ons is now third time, kind of failure to kind of get it done.
I literally had to mute all the noise around my television and when I was on Twitter Spaces and kind of let everybody allow themselves to hear what Ange Jabeur was saying in her runner-up speech because it just felt so palatable. Like I felt like I was right there in front of her, listening to her kind of just belt out her frustrations of not coming up to the moment. But on the flip side of that, I don't really hate the fact that Vondrousova won because it kind of keeps the train going of complete chaos on the WTA tour, which I kind of enjoy.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm one of these like chaos is a ladder type people. I don't need things to go to plan. If anything, I like when it sort of all splinters apart and it's complete and utter mayhem. But I do think like one of the things that one of the racket contributors I love to read the most is Jerry Maserati, and he wrote something really interesting in the New Yorker about how Ons, basically her display of sadness and vulnerability was actually sort of like cathartic and like probably well, certainly uncommon. Really, we hadn't seen a player that openly weepy and really disappointed, since that Jana Novotná incident where she cried on the shoulder of the Duchess of Kent. Obviously, I don't want to make too many comparisons there because, not for nothing, Jana Novotná went back like 2 years later and won it. But it did feel like you don't often see a player just sort of unabashedly break down and weep and just be like, oh God, this is the terrible, I feel awful inside, which was sort of like nice and refreshing, which again is one of the things we like the most about Ons Jabeur.
She lets us in, and that is a part of why watching her is so fun. Not only is her game fun, but her personality is fun, and she brings you along for the ride, the ups and the downs, the twists and the turns, and it feels like she's just going to be a interesting roller coaster of a career herself. So I feel like we're going to get that peak where she puts her hands on a big trophy. It may or may not be Wimbledon, but I feel like she's too good and she's too determined to not get her hands on some big trophies.
Well, I think for me, the storylines of tennis that I like the most are when people are human. And I don't actually care that much about the results, although obviously I'd like to see her get one. It's more the idea that this person can bring you into their world, which is something that you just said, which I think is really key to understanding her. And I want to see generationally, we've been seeing it more certainly on the WTA tour with very candid people like Elena Svitolina or Daria Kasatkina or certainly Arina Sabalenka, who you know how she's feeling, as opposed to like the sort of corporate, like on the men's side, like, well, I just want to once again remind everyone how amazing my opponent played. It's like, no, wait, get sad, like cry. I want to see you guys like snot bubbling, like just, like get really emotional. And I like
Be
that very
normal,
much.
be human.
Be
Yeah.
normal, be human. You blew it. I get it. Like who hasn't?
Yeah.
The relatability for me is a lot more interesting. Okay, so talking about the singles finals, any other results? We talked a little bit on this show about Shea Su Wei and Barbara Streisova coming back and winning doubles. I talked a little bit about Claire-Vie Ngoye, the French-American junior star who just swept the girls singles, who's going to be real, real good. Anybody, sort of stand out in terms of storylines for you that you're still kind of thinking about a couple days after Wimbledon closes?
The obvious one for me is Chris Eubanks, just because that was such a feel-good story. Like, how could you pass that up, And between me and you, the fact that he's really improved that one-handed backhand has really skyrocketed him up the rankings of players I want to watch, because I have a small, like, little niche for one-handed backhands, even though they're not that successful in today's
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
world
whoa.
of tennis.
First of all, I have a one-handed backhand, so I don't want to hear you say they're not that successful in
Yes.
today's world. Excuse me, Dominic Thiem won a Grand Slam with a one-handed backhand. Stefanos Tsitsipas's credibly contended for, well, at least most of the sets of at least 3 or 4. Like, setting your obvious slander of one-handed backhands aside, what do you think he's improved technically on his shot? I just want to get that idea out of your head, because I haven't heard anybody sort of talk about the technique at all.
Yeah, I think he uses his height to his advantage. A lot of the guys that have one-handed backhands, like you said, Dominic Thiem, somebody you mentioned earlier in the show, Justine Enna, they were on the smaller spectrum, and he's 6'6", I believe. So when a ball is coming in with top spin and kind of really the attempt of the server is to get up on the returner and make it uncomfortable, he has just leaned into that backhand. I saw him do it in Mallorca, and I saw him do it for 4 rounds at Wimbledon, and I was amazed. Like, I have never seen him go that full force on the backhand, because I always thought he realized it was a little bit of a weakness, so he would just either consciously or subconsciously be like, I'm going to slice all day. And he really went over it, and I think it has caught his opponents off guard.
Well, let me just be, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, I'm team one-handed backhand, and like I talked about yesterday on the show when I was discussing Maxime Cressy, the French-American serve and volleyer, I am team short shorts. So listen, men, you've got 2 directives from us at the show, one of which is hit more one-handies, and the second one is look at that hemline. Like, let's go. Like, it's
4
time.
inches.
4 inches
or
max.
Smaller.
4 inches max. Stretch Armstrong was just on this show talking about Ivan Lendl. That guy had a hemline. That is a
Good
short. All right, we started the show with sort of more serious topics, and I'm curious just because these things are kind of unfolding today, and you have your eyes, ears, and fingers plugged into certainly Tennis Twitter, one of our favorite landscapes that there is. You host Twitter Spaces. Tuned Into Tennis is your podcast, so you were really up on the pulse. Let's talk a little bit about Amarissa Toth. We talked about this yesterday when the incident had just occurred, a little bit of sportsmanship. Now we see this flood of player responses from the WTA. I think most of this is just these guys know how much Zhang Shuai has sort of struggled with her mental health. Obviously, she's got some situation going on politically with the government of China. But how do you read the overarching sort of conflagration that's going on Twitter right now about this situation?
Twitter is the perfect storm for stuff like this to happen, because everybody gets to weigh in almost like absolutely when it happens, as soon as somebody clips a moment of it. Well, shout out to the tournament, by the way, for not taking all the clips down, because we love to see that. But I think it was jarring for a lot of people to see, especially when she dug her foot in the clay and kind of wiped it out. And all it took was maybe one WTA player who was on Twitter and saw it to kind of make it blow up. And now we have this litany list of players kind of chiming in and taking Zhang Shuai's back, which rightfully so. Like, she was clearly moved not only by that incident, it just felt like a lot of things have been kind of carrying on her shoulders. And her opponent, who I honestly had never heard of before, which is saying something, because I know the tennis
you know the
players.
deep cuts. I feel like if somebody's not in the top 500, which she isn't, she's almost in the top 500, you pretty much have encountered them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, if I haven't seen them play, I know their name, and I didn't know either of them for her. So not a great introduction. but
No,
she's
not
young,
a great
you know.
introduction. I think that's true. You're right that there is ample evidence, which is why I think this is such a clear case of being able to take a side. It kind of reminds me of when Novak Djokovic hit the ball and it inadvertently hit the lady in the throat, and then you're just like, everybody's Marsha Cross, Johnny Cochran, the glove is fitting on the hand, or it's not. Everybody becomes like a forensic analyst, and they're like, where was the ball in micro? But I think kudos. The best galaxy brain take is one you just had, which is kudos to the tournament for not sending a takedown notice, which so often happens in the tennis world where you get this amazing thing that happens, you have a highlight, and then you can't share it. I love the idea that at least everyone's sort of, whether it's based on outrage or not, like at least everybody's
We're
engaging with this
talking
piece
about
of
tennis.
content. We're talking
Yeah.
about tennis, exactly. All right, in a sort of more somber note, I'm sure you've followed some of this Zverev news today. I kind of candidly just kind of went deep on it because it felt like something that I've watched the governing bodies fail to deal with in the last couple of years from a policy and procedural
hmm
perspective, and I'd love to see that change. But for you, any top line thoughts as this story kind of continues to develop?
It feels like there should be music playing like dun dun dun, like we've seen this before, you know? Unfortunately, like it's not something that I want to see repeated, but hopefully the ATP and the governing bodies of tennis can use this to kind of crack down on something that we've seen not only with Zverev, but with other players that play on the tour having issues that really kind of put a stain on the whole entire sport and the association. And for Zverev, like I hate that there's like allegiance that he has had as like the golden boy of the sport now, and the person that's supposed to come in and take Roger, Rafa, and Novak's place eventually. That all may be true, but it's not going to be embraced with open arms if you have this like dark cloud of abuse allegations over you. Like that's really hard for people to Google your name, see, and still want to stream your name to the top of the Arthur Ashe Stadium. You know,
Totally,
so
yeah.
it's not good, not good at
No,
all.
it's no bueno. And I think for me, just seeing how little impact those really serious pieces of news, the first two, seem to have when you have reports, you have a lot of ample sort of discussion, and then I do kind of have to make a distinction a little bit between the American tennis media and the European tennis media. Usually I'm sort of team Euro because I think they are more plugged into the sport. They do a better job generally with coverage. I think their anchors and their sort of tennis commentators are a little bit more aware of culture. They tend to be a little younger. They're a little bit more varied in their socioeconomic backgrounds and ability to speak to culture and fashion and style. But I actually think in this case, the Americans were much more sort of like, uh-oh, that's not great. Whereas the Europeans were like, this guy should be on TV. Let's give his brother a contract. He's selling a lot of rackets. And it's like, well, he must be selling a lot of rackets if you guys are standing by him and he's getting new endorsement deals under this dark cloud, which, as you said, I think in most other sports would have been like, oh, let's distance ourselves pretty seriously.
The connection of people I talk to about tennis often don't really have him high up on their like people I must see category of tennis, which maybe is about his game, but is mostly about him as a person and kind of how he comes off. And like I said, he's not doing himself any favors. And like you said, the European media and the ATP a little bit hate to like really put them over the hot coals, but they've been allowing it to slide. Every time I look at a YouTube video or promo for an event and he's seated, his face is plastered
You're
all
right.
over it.
You're right.
Even with his first allegations, and now this one, it's going to be like, okay, well, what do you guys do? Because there's mounting evidence of something is not clean in the milk. It just isn't, you know.
Something isn't clean in the milk. Is that a New
An old
Orleans?
country saying,
Is that,
yes,
is that a, I've never
it
heard that
is.
before. I'm filing that away. All right, before I let you go, there's a lot of tennis going on this week. Obviously, we got the Newport Open on grass here in the States. The ladies are in Palermo. Some of the men are up in Bostad, which is how you say that word, up in Sweden. Any matches, any particular players you've got your eye on this week?
Unfortunately, I take a little bit of a break after Wimbledon. I feel like the tour and the ATP and WTA should follow suit just to give us a breather. But I saw Arthur Fils in action. He's a really good up and coming name. Dominic Thiem, I saw him take a loss. Unfortunately, not quite sure if he's going to get back in the ranks. On the women's side, there is a lefty, Diana Schneider. She took out the top seed and defending champion in Budapest, I believe. And I love her game. She almost took out Maria Sakkari at Australian Open this year, if you're trying to figure out who I'm talking about. But she's a good American lefty, and she also has played for NC State. So yeah, some low key, but hopefully names that grow to be more household names in the future playing these weeks.
Diana Schneider, just to call out, she, if you don't know her by name, you might know her by appearance because she wears like a babushka headwear. She's a Russian player who, up until pretty recently, was on the roster at the university, at North Carolina State University as a member of the Wolfpack. She started winning a bunch on the WTA Tour, and she was like, hey, peace, guys, I'm going to go be a pro. She is fun. She's a lefty. She's got a lot of firepower. All right, last question for you, Miles, and then I'll let you go. I just had Stretch Armstrong on. I asked him because he spent a lot of time in Chris Eubanks' box up in Miami and a couple other tournaments. Who's hype? He's a member of a hype squad. Which player box is he going to sit in? His answer was Ivan Lendl, which is, nobody's going to out crazy that answer, but I love it. Whose box are you in?
Current players, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Francis Tiafoe
Sure.
because I literally wanted to be in his box for that third round Wimbledon match. Like, wake up, wake up. Maybe back in the day, a little James Blake, a little, who else I would like to root on? Taylor Townsend is a good name.
Oh,
I feel like
sure.
she's on the cusp of making some big noise
I
in
would have
doubles and
loved
singles.
to be in Taylor Townsend's box the day she beat Simona Halep in the first round of the U.S.
Yes.
Open. Taylor Townsend, Hive, Activate, and shout out to J Block. That used to be a real big thing at the U.S. Open. The James Blake fans.
It
All right,
was.
Miles.
It was good.
Unfortunately, I have to leave it there. Otherwise, we can keep talking about this all day. See you on Twitter, and thank you again for joining me.
Always fun, Caitlin. Take care.
All right, stick around. We'll be right back.